Louis Zamperini was born in 1917 in Olean, New York, but his real story began when his family moved to Torrance, California. The son of Italian immigrants, Louis grew up in a household that spoke only Italian. In school, he was bullied for not knowing English. On the streets, he was constantly in trouble, fighting, stealing, running from the police. Louis wasn't just a rebel. He was wild, uncontainable. Teachers called him hopeless. Neighbors branded him as a lost cause. But behind the chaos was a boy simply trying to survive in a world that never gave him a chance. His older brother, Pete, refused to give up on him. One day, Pete took him to the school track and told him to run. Louis scoffed at the idea. Running? That's what he did when he was escaping trouble. But Pete saw something more, and Louis ran. He wasn't just fast, he was explosive, furious. Every step was a shout against the world. In a short time, Louis transformed from a delinquent into a rising star. Records fell, coaches took notice. Newspapers printed his name. Running gave him something no one else had ever offered, purpose. He was no longer the town terror. He was the fastest kid in California. And that fire inside him, it had just been lit. By age 19, Louis was one of the most promising young runners in America. In 1936, despite being too young for the 1/500 meters, he earned a spot on the U.S. Olympic team for the 5,000-meter race. Destination: Berlin. The Olympics in Nazi Germany were electric. Jesse Owens dominated the headlines, but Louis made his mark. He didn't win a medal, but his final lap was so fast, so furious, that Adolf Hitler himself asked to meet him. "You're the boy with the fast finish," Hitler said, shaking his hand. Louis returned home a local hero. He set his sights on the 1940 Olympics in Tokyo. People believed he'd bring home the gold, but history had other plans. World War II exploded. The Olympics were cancelled. The world was burning. And Louis Zamperini, the runner, was called to fight. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces and became a bombardier on a B-24 Liberator. The missions were brutal, the conditions terrifying. Every flight over the Pacific was a roll of the dice. Flak in the air, enemy fighters on the horizon, death always circling. Louis flew aboard the Superman, a B-24 riddled with flaws, but manned by brave hearts. During a bombing raid over Nauru, the plane was torn apart by enemy fire, barely making it back to base. The damage was catastrophic. Bullet holes, shredded metal, blood on the floor, but Louis survived. Again. Then came May 27th, 1943. A search and rescue mission, flown on the Green Hornet, a B-24 known for mechanical issues. Mid-flight, both left engines failed. The plane plunged into the ocean. Chaos, screams, impact, silence. Only 3 men surfaced: Louis, the pilot Phil, and the tail gunner Mac. They climbed into 2 tiny life rafts, wounded and stunned. The ocean stretched endlessly. No land in sight. No planes above. Just sky, sun, and death waiting patiently. Day after day they drifted. Their emergency rations were gone in a single night, eaten by Mac in a panic. Hunger hit quickly. Thirst followed. The sun burned their skin until it peeled and bled. They caught albatrosses, ate them raw, used the guts as fishing bait. When rain came, they drank from cupped hands. When it didn't, they prayed. Mac's body began to shut down. The guilt consumed him. On day 14, he slipped away quietly. Louis and Phil said a prayer and released his body to the sea. Sharks circled the rafts constantly. Some tried to leap aboard. Louis fought one off with an oar. They had become ghosts under the sun, floating on salt and desperation. On day 33, a plane appeared. Louis waved frantically. Hope returned. But it was Japanese. Bullets tore into the sea. They dove overboard, hiding beneath the rafts. Miraculously, none were hit. Louis patched the holes with whatever he could find. Days stretched into weeks. Their bodies wasted away. Louis was down to skin and bones. The only thing keeping him alive was his mind, his memories, his faith, his will. On day 47, a boat appeared. It was not American. Louis Zamperini was captured by the Japanese. The war wasn't over. It had just entered its darkest chapter. They were taken to Kwajalein, known as Execution Island. There, prisoners were often tortured and killed. Louis was starved, beaten, interrogated. Then came transfer after transfer, from one nightmare to the next, until he arrived at Ofuna, a secret interrogation camp where cruelty was routine. And there he met him, Mutsuhiro Watanabe, a Japanese corporal, known among prisoners as the Bird. Young, charismatic and sadistic, the Bird singled out Louis from the start. He saw the Olympic runner not as a man, but as a trophy to break. Every day the Bird beat him, sometimes with belts, sometimes bamboo canes, sometimes his bare fists. He humiliated Louis in front of others, forced him to stand for hours, hold impossible positions. He struck his face until it swelled shut. Louis endured, but his body began to crumble. One day, they offered him comfort, a chance to make propaganda broadcasts, food, a mattress, warmth. All he had to do was speak against America. Louis refused. The beatings worsened. He was transferred to Naoetsu, a forced labor camp, where the Bird had been reassigned. There the torture escalated. One morning, Louis was forced to hold a heavy wooden beam above his head. The Bird said, "If you drop it, I shoot." Louis held the beam for 37 minutes. Blood ran from his arms, his knees buckled. But he did not fall. He would not give the Bird the satisfaction. Louis wasn't running anymore, but he was still in the race, still resisting, still surviving. In August 1945, the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered. The war was over. Louis returned home, but the real battle was just beginning. He stepped onto American soil to fanfare and cameras. Reporters called him a hero, but inside, Louis was shattered. Nightmares, flashbacks, cold sweats. He screamed in his sleep. He saw the Bird's face everywhere. He drank to forget, to silence the screams in his head. He yelled at his wife, Cynthia. He spiraled. The war had left his body, but it had burrowed into his soul. At his lowest, he stood on the edge of collapse. He dreamed of strangling the Bird. He fantasized about revenge. The anger consumed him. Cynthia, desperate to save their marriage and his life, dragged him to a tent revival in Los Angeles. A young preacher named Billy Graham spoke about pain, about redemption, about the peace that only God could offer. Louis wasn't interested. He stormed out the first night, but Cynthia begged him to return. And the next evening, something shifted. Graham spoke of forgiveness, of freedom from hatred. He said, "God sees every tear you've cried, and he offers you peace, not through vengeance, but through surrender." Louis froze. He remembered a promise he had made, floating in that raft. "God, if you save me, I'll serve you forever." He had broken that promise, but God hadn't. Louis fell to his knees, weeping. He gave his life to Christ. And for the first time in years, he slept without nightmares. The rage vanished. The darkness receded. But there was one final step: forgiveness. Louis couldn't just forgive himself. He had to forgive the Bird. He tracked down former guards, traveled back to Japan, met with men who had tortured him. He shook their hands, he embraced them. Some wept, others bowed. One said, "I am sorry." In 1998, Louis returned to Japan to carry the Olympic torch ahead of the Nagano Games. He wrote a letter to Watanabe, who had vanished, living in hiding. "I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I was forgiven first." The Bird. refused to meet him. Louis didn't need him to. Forgiveness wasn't about the past. It was about freedom. He returned home lighter, at peace. He spent the rest of his life helping troubled youth, speaking in prisons, inspiring millions. His story was told in books, documentaries, and eventually in the film Unbroken. He lived to see it all, lived to run one last symbolic race. At 97 years old, Louis passed away peacefully in his sleep, a warrior's rest. He had run farther than anyone expected, through fire, through sea, through hell, and he finished strong. Louis Zamperini wasn't just a survivor, he was the man who refused to die. If this story moved you even a little, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who needs hope. Today, subscribe for more unbelievable true stories of resilience, redemption, and the unstoppable human spirit. And remember, heroes aren't born. They're forged in fire, in pain, and in purpose.